Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unraveling a massive economic mystery that's literally unfolding right in front of us in Pakistan's business landscape. Over the last couple of years, there's been this sudden, deeply concerning exodus of multinational companies. On the surface, the standard excuse we always hear is that these are just routine global capital allocation decisions. But when you actually peek under the hood and look at the data, the scale of these exits points to a much deeper systemic issue. We're going to dig into the real numbers to figure out why the very companies keeping the formal economy afloat are suddenly disappearing, and more importantly, how we can actually reverse this dangerous trend. Okay, let's dive into this paradox. What makes this whole exodus so incredibly baffling is that these aren't just failing businesses cutting their losses, right? We're talking about a wide range of multinational heavyweights across super lucrative sectors: telecom, mobility, oil and gas. A lot of these guys have been operating profitably in the country for decades. They've weathered massive crises, conflicts, prolonged internal security challenges, you name it. Yet somehow, over the past few years, we've hit this bizarre inflection point that's forcing these resilient titans to finally pull the plug and pack their bags. So, what exactly changed?
Well, to understand what changed, we need to look at an economic concept called hysteresis. According to the source data, this isn't just about global capital moving around on a chessboard. It's a silent, long-lasting economic scarring. The analysis points the finger at a mix of government policy apathy and the specific design of IMF programs. And here's the kicker. This is hitting domestic businesses just as hard as foreign multinationals, even if the local closures don't get as much media airtime. It's this severe structural environment where businesses are, quite literally, being choked out of existence.
Section 1. The culprit, the tax burden trap. While a lot of people like to point to broad policy inconsistency as the main bad guy here, the real trap is actually a relentless reliance on terrible tax policy and super weak enforcement. It's like a tale of two economies. On one side, you've got the formal sector, the good guys, right? Who are forced to navigate this ridiculously complex tax regime, juggling multiple jurisdictions, heavy-handed regulations, and just massive compliance costs. Then, on the flip side, you have the informal sector. They're undocumented, fragmented, and flying completely under the radar of the tax authorities. Because the government fails to expand the actual tax base and catch the informal players, they resort to this heavy-touch approach against the documented businesses. They are effectively punishing them for playing by the rules. And because the tax authorities can't seem to force unregistered suppliers into the tax net, what do? They pass the buck. They literally force the formal businesses to become withholding agents. This means documented companies have to do the government's job for them. For the fast-moving consumer goods sector, the FMCGs that supply our everyday household products, this extra regulatory burden tacks on a direct 6.5% cost. The formal, registered companies just have to eat this extra 6.5%, which severely crushes their profit margins in an environment that is already super expensive to operate in. Section 2. The evidence. The rise of illicit trade. Now, the sheer scale of the black market boom is the smoking gun in this whole economic mystery. You see, a taxation regime really dictates how firms behave. And right now, the system actively incentivizes businesses to operate in the shadows as fragmented, undocumented entities instead of growing into large, visible players. Just take a look at this staggering number. According to estimates from the Pakistan Business Council, the value of annual illicit trade in the country sits at a massive $68 billion. $68 billion. This underground economy directly robs the government of revenue. But here is the tragic irony of it all. To compensate for the massive tax loss from this flourishing illicit trade, the Federal Board of Revenue, the FBR, resorts to overtaxing the remaining compliant firms. They're just squeezing the shrinking formal sector harder and harder to make up for the billions they lose to the black market.
Now, what's really fascinating, and honestly kind of absurd, is how this enforcement failure plays out in the real world. Let's look at the tobacco industry as an example. There are over 40 cigarette manufacturers operating in the country right now. Care to guess how many are actually fully compliant with tax and public health regulations? 2. Just 2. And guess what? They're both multinational firms. The other 38+ domestic manufacturers? Completely non-compliant. They are capturing the vast majority of the market volume simply by ignoring the rules.
Because the government keeps relying on these frequent ad hoc changes to the excise taxation regime while completely failing to enforce the rules on the illicit players, legitimate sales have just tanked. The illicit sector has effectively captured the market. And the annual revenue loss to the government from this one single industry? It's projected at a mind-boggling 300 billion rupees. To put that into perspective, That is nearly 0.3% of the entire country's GDP, just vanishing into thin air, all because enforcement is completely broken.
Section 3. The blueprint. 2 low-hanging solutions. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. There is actually a roadmap for redemption here. And fixing this doesn't even require reinventing the wheel. The solution really boils down to 2 highly doable, low-hanging steps. Step 1 is simply improving enforcement, particularly in sectors that we know are prone to illicit trade. Step 2 is simplifying the complex sales tax regime by effectively utilizing something called the third schedule of the Sales Tax Act. So the crucial point is that these 2 straightforward steps could generate hundreds of billions in extra revenue, all while throwing a desperately needed lifeline to the formal sector.
Let's start with step 1, enforcement. The FBR desperately needs to focus its energy on industries that are being absolutely hammered by the black market. We just talked about cigarettes, but this exact same pattern repeats across a bunch of major industries. We're talking tea, tires, footwear, everyday fast-moving consumer goods, and beverages. These are massive markets where tax-compliant firms are fighting for their lives against untaxed illicit competitors. Simply applying the law evenly across these specific sectors would instantly level the playing field, and of course, bring in a ton of revenue.
Then we have step 2, which is honestly beautifully simple. It's the third schedule fix. Right now, the system is full of weird anomalies where some products are included in this schedule and others, like a lot of everyday grocery FMCG items, are just left out completely. The fix is to take all these FMCG items and move them completely into the third schedule. Why? Because the third schedule requires the manufacturer to print the retail price directly on the packaging. Boom! It instantly makes the tax base totally visible to everyone. Let's see how this builds into a practically foolproof system. In the current setup, the tax base is super easy to manipulate through hidden supply chain discounts, transfer pricing, and undervaluation. It's basically a tax evasion nightmare. But under the third schedule, because the retail price is stamped right there on the pack, the tax base is 100% transparent. On top of that, the manufacturer deposits the full amount of the sales tax right at the very beginning, at the exact time of supply. So there's absolutely no revenue loss for the government, the collection process is vastly simpler, and the documented companies get huge relief from ongoing compliance harassment. It is literally a win-win.
The author of the source material we're looking at, Sakib Sherani, sums up this entire crisis perfectly with this quote: "Predatory taxation of the formal sector is a fundamental factor in rising informality. The current system is just this giant, vicious, negative feedback loop. By overtaxing the tiny handful of companies that actually follow the rules just to make up for the masses that don't, the government is actively shrinking its own tax base. They're punishing the exact same businesses that are keeping the economy alive." Which brings us to this final, absolutely critical question. The blueprint is right there. The low-hanging fruit is ripe for the picking. So will policymakers finally break this destructive nexus between a broken tax system and rising informality? Or will the formal economy and the multinational companies that power it continue to be taxed into complete extinction? It's basically a choice between embracing transparency or clinging to a predatory system that eventually takes everyone down with it. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helped make a really complex issue feel a bit clearer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.